So I'm terribly biased, but let me tell you that he's an extraordinary young man, and his story is an incredible one. It'll make you cry, it'll make you laugh, all at the same time. 45 minutes is a very short time in which to tell the story of his 4.5 years in captivity, but he will give you a few of the highlights, and he's going to tell you stuff that's not in the book. So you'll have to go out and buy the book and read it to get the whole story. So what I'd like to do is, Shahbaz is a businessman. He works, he does all kinds of wonderful things. He has 2 wonderful children. His wife Neha is here, and she's been an incredible support. And so what I thought was we just let Shahbaz do all the talking. If he forgets to say something, I'll just prompt him along. So Shahbaz, what we would like you to do is to start at the beginning. How did you react to what happened to you?
Before I start, can you guys, I just wanted to say this is unbelievable. Thank you so much for coming. I'm completely overwhelmed. I'm very grateful to all of you for coming. Thank you, really thank you so much. I forgot your question.
I said, do you want to start at the beginning? How did you react to what happened to you? What was your first thought when you woke up?
So, I had no prior knowledge that something like this was going to happen to me. I think after my father, who was the governor of Punjab, after he was assassinated, actually I don't like to say that, after he was murdered, we felt that our family had a certain element of danger around it. But what that danger is, we didn't quite understand. There was an instance where a grenade was thrown outside my mother's office. It didn't have a pin. My younger sister was sent pictures of beheaded people and said, "You're next." So I think we always knew that something horrible could happen, but I think nobody ever thought that I could get kidnapped, and get kidnapped for this kind of time. I was just driving to office. It was a normal day for me. It was a Friday. I had just come back from Dubai. I'd finished up some work, and I was traveling for a holiday. And I just wanted to go to office and meet my mother and update her and fly out that night. And my office is on Alam Road. So if you're not familiar with Lahore, it's one of the main commercial streets. It's vibrant. All the offices are there. All the big franchises are there, and almost everyone that I know works around the area or lives around the area. So right outside my office, I was attacked by masked gunmen. Again, I presumed that this was just a normal carjacking. That they sort of, targeted me because, I don't know, I just thought it was a normal carjacking. So I got out, I had my wallet, I had a watch or something, I had money, I was like, just take it and don't worry and just go, I'm not going to do anything, and they started hitting me. And I didn't have time to quite understand. Obviously I was scared, but I was trying to be calm. In that moment, I did something that actually saved my life, which was, I had a sports car, and in 2011, there were very few cars that had a start button. So I don't know why, I just threw the key in the side pocket and put the car off. And that actually ended up saving my life, because the driver who got in the car couldn't put it on and got left behind. And eventually later that day, 3 of them were caught by the security agencies. And in that entire thing, my life was saved. Otherwise, if they hadn't gotten directly these 3 men, they would have killed me in 4 months if there was no exchange. So I'm here, they're beating me and they're trying to put me in the car, and I kept saying, there's no need for this, you can have whatever you like and just take the car, take the money, I'm not going to do anything. And they put me in the back of the car, and they were punching me and kicking me. There were about 4 or 5 of them in the car. And while I was pleading, I just remember that who I found out later was my kidnapper. He turned around and he just looked at me and he said, "Main tumhare liye aaya hu, Shahbaz." Now the thing is that he said my name. So a kind of fear that I'd never actually experienced in my life, which I then experienced multiple times through this journey. I had actually never felt emotion like that. I was petrified. There's just no, I think I even begged before they injected me with ketamine, and I was out. After that, I was gone for 3 days. I was in and out of consciousness because they kept drugging me with this, it's supposed to be like a horse tranquilizer or something, but they were injecting it directly into my blood. So and they were beating me throughout. So it was a very violent and disturbing experience. When I actually regained consciousness, I think I had vomited and sort of urinated in the clothes that I was wearing. It was just awful. And I knew that I had been in a home in Lahore, but I had woken up somewhere on the motorway and asked to use the bathroom, gotten into a fight with the driver, because I said, I'm cooperating with you. Why are you treating me like this? And I had no idea of time either. I knew maybe a day or two had gone. But when I properly regained consciousness, from the first time that I was on that street on Alam when they took me into the car, was in Mir Ali, Waziristan, on Sunday, late Sunday. I don't know, I struggled with what emotions I felt, because the only thing that I knew was that I'm going to die at that time. And I also, seeing the people that I was with and my surroundings, I knew that it wasn't going to be an easy or quick death either. It was going to be very painful, a very torturous experience, and also nothing that I'd ever experienced in my life. I've never done anything to go to jail, and this is not jail. This is not even one of those jails where you go before you're hung or something like that. This is just the scariest thing out of some horror movie. It was just to give you a brief understanding of the room, it was a small mud room connected to a main area where the fighters sat. And they used to keep their sheep in there. And since I had gone on the 26th of August in 2011, it was just a few days before Ramzan finished and Eid was coming. So they actually had goats or whatever inside that room. So the first thing that they did was they threw a jhadu at me and they said, clean the room. And I'll be honest with you, I'd never done anything like this in my life. So standing, I just took the jhadu standing and I moved it and I got a punch on the back of my head because obviously I wasn't doing it correctly. And then they hit me a few times, they put me in my chains, they tied my leg up, and then I spent, 4.5 years in kind of this kind of state. Sometimes things got better, a lot of times they got worse, but with time, I realized that they used to tell me that my father was not Muslim and that I deserved this and that what he had stood up for in his life he deserved to die the way he did and that I deserved to die the way that I was going to. But somewhere along this journey, I realized that my father had done something that not a lot of people in the world do, which is, regardless of having all this power, privilege, luxury, life of luxury, he was the governor, he was a very successful self-made businessman, he never inherited anything in his life. None of this mattered to him. He actually, it was so easy for him to just forget about it and stand up for someone who is actually from the poorest part of our country. And not just that they're poor, they're also, they're Christians, so they're a minority in this country. And sometimes we don't realize the treatment of our minorities, but he was very well aware of it because both my grandmothers were English and they were both Christians. So if somebody abused a Christian, it was like they abused his mother or his wife's mother. It was something impossible for him to digest only because of their religion. So it was not an acceptable standard for any human being to be persecuted if you were my father. And he lost I think he knew the dangers that surrounded him. I think we didn't. I don't know. I feel very guilty because I wish I could have done more I don't know if I could have ever stopped him. He would never have listened to me. The only time in my life that I told him, these guys don't understand what you're saying and there's this very serious campaign of hate against you, He just turned around to me and he said, I don't have to answer to any man. I have to answer to Allah. And I cannot face him knowing that I had all this power and I did not help this woman. And he died 3 days later. So I was in this state of incarceration, being tortured. Actually, it was not just that I was incarcerated or I was being tortured. I was also looked on as a lesser. I don't even think they ever looked at me as a human being. So it was insane for me to even understand or come to grasp with why are these people doing this to me. But somewhere along this journey, because they said it enough, I realized that if this is happening to me because of what my father did, what he stood up for, then I would be a coward if I was ashamed of his sacrifice or scared of the people that tortured me because of his sacrifice. So it built a certain resolve, his legacy, his memory, his own experiences, things that he had taught me as a child, nothing that I'd ever learned in school or university, but lessons from him about how he had lived his life. Those lessons are actually what gave me the resolve and the strength to survive this.
So Shahbaz, in your book, you do talk about the fact that, your father was with you those 4.5 years. I mean, you felt his presence and he guided you in things. So you've talked about that. You've talked about your father being there. But what was it that kept you sane? What did you do? What are the little daily things that you did to keep you going? And I believe you kept diaries.
Yes.
Which is not in the book.
So it's very difficult. Firstly, because I spent the first 6 months not knowing what was day and what was night. I was in complete solitary confinement. And the only time that these people would come to visit me was they came to visit me 3 or 4 times in a group. It was to make a video for my family, for the ransom demand. And I think my kidnapper would come masked to visit me in the middle of the night, or, it was very intimidating, those visits. So somewhere along, I didn't know how to feel, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know how to pass my day, and one day I started singing. Singing is nicer, I started rapping, I listened to hip-hop. And it was Dr. Dre. I don't know how many of you are familiar with his kind of music, but it's very gangster. So the guard opened the door and came in and said, what are the sounds coming out of this room? So I said, just, passing time. It was nice to get some light in, and he punched me or something and said, don't do it again. So right after he left, I got up and I started doing stand-up comedy. And just kind of it's very difficult for me to explain this. I know sometimes I had to leave a lot of this out of my book because my late uncle used to keep joking with me and saying people are going to think you're crazy and that you imagine people there when there's no one there. But the truth is that I was in such darkness. The first time I spoke to my mother was after 6 months, and I could not recognize her voice. I've never felt more ashamed as a son because, she's a very protective and very loving mother, and she's been there in moments for me that I don't know how many other children get to experience things like this in their lives, losing their father the way I did, and having such a strong mother who's, willing to stand right, protect you. And I felt this overwhelming sense of guilt. How can I not remember her voice? But she was very strong, and that's another story. But so basically, I didn't know how to pass this time. I couldn't think of anything that was reasonable, and so I found I was, before I got kidnapped, slightly humorous, at least when I was with my friends. And so I started doing stand-up comedy. I started imagining, for example, when I was young, I used to go to my best friend. His name is Rafael Rashid. He's actually Ahmed Rashid's son. Ahmed Rashid is a very famous author who wrote the book, The Taliban. He's like, I've grown up in his house. So I've been going to their house for Christmas lunch since I was a kid, baby. And some of my happiest memories of Christmas are there because all my friends are there and his mother brings out this turkey. I've actually written about it in my book. So in this black, dark, dead space, I just used to close my eyes and imagine all my family and all my friends and the food and, I almost trying to smell it, to feel it, and there's this very sad story in my book because it's very difficult to articulate these things in literature. And so I tried to tell this story about Christmas and how sad this imagination or imaginary world that I'd created in my prison was, because sometimes, you do this with your watch or something and there's a sound that it makes. But instead of that sound, my reality would always be that I was in chains. And so that imagination would always be broken with a very harsh reality. But I would always imagine, I would always just, I'd remember my friends, I'd remember the best times of my life, I would remember music. And then later on, maybe 8, I got droned, comes very easily. But when I was droned, they moved me from this jail into my kidnapper's home. And in that home, somewhere a month or two later, I gathered up the strength and went to this, because he was a madman, and said, I want to write. So he said, what do you want to write about, me? So I said, no, I want to write about just my time here. So he gave me a book and a pen. I call it a diary, but it was like, one of those copies. And that must have been in late 2012. And right up to the last 6 months of my kidnapping, I had about 6 diaries that I had in detail written about every single day of my captivity, about my guards, about my kidnapper. And it was very funny because I was asking Khala, my Khala was asking, why would they let you keep a diary? And I was like, one would think that they'd be scared, but they used to also tell me their plans. Like, they planned the Karachi airport attack in front of me. And they were not scared. Like, they were like, what do you think? You're going to go and tell someone and that's going to make a difference. The only thing my kidnapper used to ask, he used to pick up my diary, he didn't know, so he just go through the book like that, and he'd say, मेरे बारे में कुछ बुरा तो नहीं लिखा? So I used to tell him something that he actually told me, because once he saw me crying and praying. So we had this love-hate relationship, love from his side and hate from mine. So as soon as I said Ameen, he put his arm around me and he's like, मेरी बात सुनो, इंसान को एक दुआ ही मिलती है जिंदगी में, if you're lucky. अपनी दुआ लानत भेजने पे ना कर देना, अम्मी पैसे देने पे की दुआ करना, सही है ना? So when he used to ask me कि मेरे बारे में लिखा है, I was like, एक ही दुआ होती है, एक ही आवाज़ होती है, एक ही डायरी होएगी, उसमें तुम्हें गालियाँ देख लिखूँगा तो ज़ाया ही करूँगा ना सारा. Anyways, now I have a book in which I abuse him, so. But we had this back and forth. I'll tell you another funny story related to the diary. So one day I was writing in my diary or just doing my stand-up, and suddenly he comes in. He used to love coming and spending time with me. He used to kind of think that, it was it was an enlightening experience in conversation, not when he tortured me. So he came in once and he said, where are the most beautiful women in the world? Now you have to understand, this is not like my regular school friend asking me this question, He's the commander of the intelligence wing of the IMU, which is one of the most ferocious, terrorist groups out there. So I was like, I am not going to answer that. Like, I was like, it's a trick question. Does it lead to torture? What happens when I say a country? So I said, I don't know. He said, "Batao na yaar." So I was like, okay, South America, as far as you can go. He's like, it's too far. Yaar. Tell me around, this region. So I said, I was just praying to Allah, I said, please don't get me whacked tonight. So I said, I think Italy. He said, हाँ, Italy. क्योंकि जब हम रोम फतह करेंगे तो हम वैटिकन को अपना हैरम बनाएंगे. So I know you guys are laughing right now, but you have to understand the shock that, I was like, the Sistine Chapel is going to be painted on with the IMU. So many years later, we were bombed out of Waziristan into Afghanistan. So it took us 7 days to actually leave Waziristan and make it to Afghanistan. And when we made it there, everybody fell into sajda, and the Taliban guide looked at all of us and said, इधर तो कुत्ता भी खुले आसमान के नीचे नहीं सोता, तो तुम लोग सजदा किस चीज़ की कर रहे हो? So I looked at my kidnapper. I was like, listen, Rome is that way. So, so he looked at me with a look that I only a serial killer would have. But we had this, back and forth, and I built this. Like I found the strength to take him on, and it all started with asking for that diary. So yeah, it was very empowering for me.
So the main protagonist, by the way, he was talking about being droned, being hit by drone strikes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was in several drone strikes. So the main protagonist in your book, of course, is your number one kidnapper, Muhammad Ali. And then there's his mother-in-law, Aya Jan. So Muhammad Ali was this vicious, vicious, vicious man who did the most terrible things to Shahbaz and made videos of them and sent them to us. And made us watch them and then asked questions afterwards, to make sure you watch the whole thing. Some were 12 hours long. So his mother-in-law was an interesting character, and I think it will be really quite enlightening for Shahbaz to expound on that.
By the way, one of the, people ask me a lot of things like, have you brought anything back from your kidnapping? And I'm like, there are no souvenirs or bus tickets. But mentally or physically or emotionally, I'm okay. But the videos that they used to make of me were very humiliating because, they pull my nails out, they would just do the most horrific things, and they would come the night before and say, "Tayari karo, subah nakhun nikalenge." It's not like my football coach who would say, "Subah we have a big match, so tayari karo." It's just not the same.
But the nails were the least of it. And they sent the nails.
Yeah, they used to send them the nails, DNA test karao or something, like they needed to do that. But so they used to make these very extravagant torture videos. The nails are the least of the worst things that they did. They would take out flesh from my back. They would carve my back with knives. They sewed my mouth shut for 7 days and starved me on camera and sent it to these guys. And there were points in the video where I said a message. So if you forwarded it or something, you wouldn't catch on. And if they asked them, every question, if they missed one, they'd say, we're going to bury him again. So they would bury me up to my neck for 12 hours at a time. Things that I can't even remember. I got shot in my leg, but that was an accident. It wasn't planned. They used to lash me. So it's very funny whenever I meet a police guy. I don't even know what's funny about this, but they have this chittar in jails over here, right? 3 chittars and you reveal your life story to the police guy. So I'm like, after my 3rd chittar, I got about 100. My back was broken and deformed and, it took its toll. So I always joke with police officers, मैंने तो पहले वाले भी अपनी ज़िंदगी की कहानी बता दी, बाकियों की ज़रूरत नहीं थी. But they had no sense of humor about it. Everything that they did was planned, meticulously planned, and sent to them. And Khala and Mama were the only ones who had to watch. Like, she was my mother's support, but my mother had to watch each video. And till today, this is something that is an overwhelming. I don't know, it's kind of like, something that bothers me. I've never gotten over the fact that my mother and my khala and the people in my family had to see this, because it was very dehumanizing for me. I still, sometimes when somebody tells me you're very brave or, something, I'm very dismissive of it. And I don't mean to be or insult someone, but I actually remember the nights that I used to scream, the nights that I used to cry, the nights that I used to pray for some kind of light in my life. I remember the first time that I smiled, it was 2 years. It was because of something that my kidnapper's child did. And the smile felt alien. We have all these lines on our faces and our hands and our body that are this is our characteristics. This is some of the emotions that we've displayed over our life. And imagine someone who would say they lived a happy existence up till that point couldn't even remember what it was like to smile. It was a very dark situation. And this was being done, I know what was being done to me, but it was actually the whole point of torturing me was to torture my mother. That was it. It was to release a ransom and 25 militants. That's it. With me, it was simple. They could just shoot me or behead me. They didn't need to torture me. But this was done for my mother. So, it was very difficult, and I thought that it was never ending, and maybe this is something. I used to actually thank God every time a torture session ended that all my limbs were like, they didn't cut my finger or my ear, because they used to threaten me with stuff like this. Then one night, they were torturing me, and I mentioned that they used to remove flesh from my back. So this night, they decided to remove 3 or 4, I can't remember how many, I've got 3 or 4 holes in my back. So they basically decided that they were going to do 4 at one time, right? I think on the third one, my screams were so, like, I was in, such pain, and I was basically standing in a, those baltis that you wash clothes in? You must have all seen them. So I was actually standing in this balti in just my, underwear. It was very humiliating. The whole thing is quite humiliating, but so I'm standing there, and one guy is, got my hands against the wall, another guy has his gun, and then one guy is holding me, the plas, the skin, the flesh with the plas, and then the other guy is cutting it. So in my screaming, and it's very difficult to explain the pain. Although I always tell people that physical pain is something that I can actually explain. Everybody's had a cut or a fall or a bruise or a broken leg, but loneliness is something I can never, there are no words that I can explain how lonely or alone I was for all those years. But anyways, so while he's doing this to me, and you have to understand how impossible this situation is. Women in these groups live behind a parda. And that parda is literally for father, husband, and brother, and son. And chacha and mamu are not even allowed. You have to understand how strict the parda is. You do not hear a woman's voice. You never see them. In militant groups, I don't like saying Islam. I have a big problem when people relate these groups to Islam, or they call them Islamists, or they call them Mujahideen. They're not, right? They're mercenaries. And they shouldn't be, they have no God, and they shouldn't be affiliated with one either. So while this is happening and I'm screaming, this lady who lives behind this parda, and you have to understand, my kidnapper's mother-in-law was Muhammad Tahir Farooq's wife. Muhammad Tahir Farooq was the founder of the IMU. And under Mullah Muhammad Umar, who was the Amir of the Afghan Taliban, he called himself Amirul Momineen. Muhammad Tahir Farooq had the title of Amirul Mahajirin, which is that all the foreign fighters that come, he is their head, because he was from Uzbekistan and Mullah Umar's right-hand man. He was more senior in Afghanistan than Osama bin Laden. Osama bin Laden had a global terrorist group, but Muhammad Tahir Farooq was Mullah Umar's friend. He was also Baitullah Masood's friend, and I don't want to say teacher, but one of his guiding, force, or whatever you want to call these madmen. He also gave the first fatwa in Afghanistan for the beheading of soldiers, and then taught them how to use walkie-talkies. And he's one of the main people who convinced them that suicide bombings is perfectly okay, right? So this man, Muhammad Tahir Farooq, is a very important man if you study terrorist groups that have emerged from Afghanistan since 2004, or before that, a few years before that. So for his wife to break all these barriers, these parda barriers, and come where the men are and say, don't touch this boy, he is a guest in my house, get your hand. She was barging into this room while I'm being bled, being cut open, and she's the one breaking these barriers to save my life. It is just not possible. This is one of the many miracles that I actually experienced during my captivity. So this woman, it's very difficult, right? My khala and me were actually having this conversation in the morning, where she was like, if you have a love or affiliation, some kind of connection for this woman, it's kind of considered Stockholm syndrome, right? No, because if I saw her on a traffic light here, I know why she's there. She's there to blow and kill all of us, right? And she's okay with it. She'll kill me outside of that house if she saw me at a traffic signal and she was about to explode her vest. She wouldn't stop and say, "Oh, that's Shahbaz, the guy I saved." So you have to understand, she showed me mercy in a place where there was no humanity. No humanity. I'm telling you, I don't know, I had a love for her and her family. They saved my life. Her grandchildren were the reason why I smiled. Her son stopped this madman from basically, cutting me into little pieces. So, 3, 4 of them showed me so much kindness and they protected me and they saved my life. And then, almost to a point where I felt like I had become part of their family. I used to live with them. When we were droned, I used to run with them. When we were in jet strikes, I used to take care of the kids. We all had roles in that house. I had a role. In that house is where my chains came off, my leg, I could walk in that room. I got my diaries. I remember the first time I asked for toothpaste was in that home. I got a decent meal there. I was allowed to take a shower there. I know that these things, I hadn't showered. I used to shower, maybe showered once in 6 months. My beard was like down to here. My hair, I used to look at my face and not even remember who the guy was that they took on that 26th of August.
And she gave you your first proper meal?
Sorry?
She gave you your first proper meal?
Yeah, and by the way, proper meal just means rice and aloo. Yeah, mantus. I used to get, it's like a dumpling in Uzbekistan. But because my kidnapper hated me, he said, don't give him the meat one, give him the carrot one. So I used to have the mantu with carrot. But in this very, very dark, very, very evil place, and amongst the most barbaric, I don't know if human beings even like to be related to these people, but amongst these people, I found this light. And it is this the way that the family was with me, the way they protected me, the way we ran together, the way we hid together, the way we lived together, it gave me piece by piece my humanity back. Whenever somebody asks me, why are you not a broken man? Why don't you have these deep psychological issues? Anything. Why don't you get PTSD? Do you wake up in the middle of the night and you're in a war zone? No. Because the hardest things that had happened to me, this family actually helped put me back, like they put me back together, gave me my sanity back, they gave me my memory back, my life back. And also, what they gave me was an incredible thing, which is hope. I was in such a hopeless situation that it's so easy to be hopeless. Just say that, I'm going to die, it's not going to work out. But I read in the Quran, and I don't remember the exact translation, but I was also in a very low point in my life, and the Quran was the only thing that I had. And I read an ayat, and it said, and I looked into Seerat and deeper explanations. I had a little library over there. These guys would give me. So I looked into Seerat for the explanation of this ayat, and basically what I understood was it said, you can never be hopeless because that means you've given up on God's ability of doing a miracle, right? And why do you believe in God? Because He's not the same as you. Because He can do things you can't imagine, He parted the sea for Musa alayhi salam to escape Pharaoh's army. He has done things for, I don't like giving prophets examples because, their ability to have a miracle, God's love for them, it's completely different. But if you read the Quran, you'll see stories of human beings and miracles that God has done for them. And there's so many ayats in the Quran. Like, I remember one that never leaves me is, remember when you were going through your worst and you prayed to us, and then we helped you, and then we lifted your pain. Don't ever be amongst the ungrateful. Don't ever forget when you used to cry and when you used to pray, I'm the one who helped you. So hope, right? It's God's divinity. It's the most amazing part about Allah. Because what seems impossible to you, and I've seen it with my own eyes. I'm sitting here in front of all of you, and I know how I knew myself, I would probably never come home. That doesn't mean that I'd given up hope because I wanted to live. I didn't want to die as an animal or as a prisoner, right? This was my hope. But I remember when I went into Afghanistan and the way that we went into Afghanistan, I thought, how am I going to come back? Nobody comes back. Afghanistan is a place, Waziristan, Alaka Ghair, Mir Ali, Miran these are places where people go to disappear. You never come back from these areas. If you've ever been here, I don't know who's come back, but I never gave up hope. And that is the most beautiful gift. That has been my strength from the day that I read that ayat till the day that I was free. Even when I was free, the journey back home, I was very skeptical. I didn't know if the people that I'm with will betray me, if they're going to take me to the place that I have to go to. Do they know who I am? Is this a big, setup? But I was like, कोई नहीं, वो तवक्कुल एक चीज़ होती है, आप अपनी ज़िंदगी बस अल्लाह के हाथ में छोड़ देते हैं, जो भी होएगा बेहतरी के लिए होएगा. मगर that doesn't mean that you're just like, okay, you have to do the best you can, right? When you leave something in Allah's hand, that means now it's even more difficult, because now you have to do the best that you can. And he says it. He's like, if you reach out to me with your hand, with however far your hand can go, I'll reach out to you tenfold. So it was the most beautiful thing that happened to me. I found hope, and I never gave up. I literally thought that, you know what, one day Allah will take me home. And I still remember when I was on that bike, on the way back was easier than the way there. I just kept thinking, I just thought, what a life, I don't know if people get to see miracles, or if sometimes we can say, oh, what happened was a miracle. But I saw this, a door open, like a sea part, and safely from the middle of Afghanistan, just back home. So,
so we've talked about Muhammad Ali, we've talked about Aya Jan. What about Sohail and Manchester United?
So, that's another miracle that I had. Imagine finding a guard that had done hijrat from Manchester to Afghanistan and was a Manchester United fan. He could have been anyone. He could have been a Chelsea fan, a Liverpool fan, anything fan. But he was a man, and actually when he told me, it was a very funny story. So basically, this young boy, maybe when he was around, I met him when he was about 19, but he came from Manchester to Waziristan when he was about 17, and he was involved in a petty crime. So he was involved in a petty crime, and, poor people there, Muslim, brown, Tajik, it's a bit tough. So he did what any stupid 17-year-old would do, and he ran away to Turkey. When he got to Turkey, he met some other Uzbeks who told him, oh, there's a very safe route into Pakistan, and there's a lovely Uzbek community there. They'll take care of you. Go over there. Anyone who has cases in Moscow or Uzbekistan or Kyrgyzstan, and by the way, Mir Ali and Miran are the most, I don't know what the word is, but they've got more foreigners than Islamabad, right? You can find people from any walk of life, Nigeria, Somalia, Turkey, Chechnya, South Korea. The guy talking to my mother and my khala was a South Korean. They could never figure out his accent. They kept asking me, why would he talk like that? I was like, he was South Korean. That's why the American accent was coming from there. And they couldn't believe it. They were like, what was a South Korean doing in Waziristan? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has this. So very diverse population of Mir Ali and Miranshah. And this guy, of all the people in the world, he just came to me one day, and my halat wasn't good. It was, I was still eating from this little bowl and chains and whatever, and he's like, you like football? And he's not from Russia, but if you've lived in the Russian sphere, you have a very deep voice. So, he's like, you like football? And I was like, yeah, I like football. He's like, who do you like? And actually, before I could answer, he's like, you're probably Man U fan, right? Or Chelsea, Real Madrid. I was like, it's not real. I'm a Man United. If you watch football in the 90s and 2000s, it would be ridiculous to support another team. So I'm a Man United fan. He's like, me too. I was like, oh, wow. What does that even mean? So the next thing I know, he comes to me, and it's like he's making a plan. And he's like, we are going to listen to this game. And he spoke English, by the way, because he was from Manchester. So he's like, but we have to listen on earphones because nobody can know that we're doing this. If somebody finds out, I get 100 lashes and you probably get 100 lashes. So I was like, I haven't done anything. I'm not going to take 100 lashes because you wanted to listen to a game. But anyways, so we planned it. And if you watch sports, if something happens, we all watch cricket, right? It doesn't matter if you watch it every day. Even my mother's sitting with me and wo ball karata or out hota and she's like, yeah, you can't help but some kind of vocal, we couldn't. So it was all like, yes, and really weird, like kind of like, I don't know. And from 2012, so I actually heard Man United win a Premier League in solitary confinement. I don't think anyone has done that. It's like, so, but this was a miracle. This was a miracle for me. Allah sent this for me in a place where I don't think Sports World or Sky Sports even reaches, right? And He sent it through a radio, which, sometimes when I'm talking to my daughter, she doesn't know what a CD player is, she doesn't know what a Walkman is, she doesn't know what any of these things are. It's like crazy old technology. But when I was a kid, radios were obsolete. Like we had Walkmans and, TDKs or I don't know what, but we'd moved on from radio technology. So imagine an obsolete technology was my only window to the outside world. It was, it was the most phenomenal gift that I got as well. Because, Khala, you asked me something, that how did you spend your day to day? So yes, I used to, do gangster rap. Yes, I used to do stand-up comedy. I used to write in my diaries. I used to think about my life, about all the people that were part of my life. And by the way, I've had a wonderful life with wonderful people, always. Amazing memories. But, whatever that emptiness, there was this emptiness. I had nothing to look forward to. And now, every week, on a Saturday or a Sunday or midweek, I had a Champions League game or a Premier League game. And I cannot tell you how I would wake up each day, 3 days left before we kill these guys, and I'm not talking about human beings, I'm talking about the football teams, right? So, and and we had this passion was equal. Like he became a better fan because of me. We would do trivia, we would, remind each other. Sometimes, by the way, it's very funny. So we would be in jet strikes in Shawal Valley, and it's being in a jet strike is, it's just a unique experience. I would not advise it to anyone. So you're sitting there and you dig a hole and you kind of get inside this hole, right? It's like a grave, but it's like a bunker as well. And it's always under these, in Shawal, you have these big chalgoze ke darakht, pine cone trees. I didn't even know that chalgozas were inside pine cone, by the way, before Shawal. So you're under these massive, trees, and you dig a hole and you get in, and then all night, 5-6 hours, the Pakistan army is just jets. It's insane. And, he'd be like, we'd start talking about the game, transfers, just players, what's going wrong with the team, I think maybe if you, and start spending these nights talking to each other. Whereas before, I would spend them alone in this room and not know, what to even feel while something like this is going on. But living through it, I'd actually kind of become immune to it as well. Like I just knew what to do when the jet would come. Run outside, get under the tree, dig the hole, get inside, sit there for 6 hours, go back in when the jets leave, and trained. So he was, I never say he was my friend. He had a selfish desire that he couldn't fulfill anywhere except in the jail cell with me. And so he did what he had to do for himself. I was just, like I said, I told him first day, I'm not even your accomplice, I'm not going down for this. But it wasn't because he felt any humanity towards me or he felt that what was happening to me was wrong. It's really important because when I was being tortured, he would hand the tools to my kidnapper to pull my nails out, to pull flesh from my back. It was him. And imagine then going with that person in, a room, you're bleeding, you're bandaged up, and you're listening to a Man U game. It's not, I didn't have, I have a lot of appreciation. Sohail was a miracle for me. He himself wasn't a miracle, but what he brought to me was a gift from God. It was a lifeline. It was a bit of my sanity, a bit of the thing, a window. But he I didn't have the same thing that I had for Aya Jan, because he would give the very tools that, caused me all this physical damage. So it was tough. It was very tough. But I always say that jo bhi hai, this came from God. I can't tell you how, when I used to say my dua, I used to say, before Finland, thank you Allah for Man United, Ameen. Like it was a long dua. But in the end, I remember when the dua started with praying for my father, for my mother, for my brother, my sister, Khala, Mamu, Nani, go my friend, few of them are here, Sikandar, Mia, just my childhood friends. I would pray for them. I would keep telling myself, I read somewhere that, God really likes a prayer that's not selfish, right? So I was like, I'm never going to pray for myself, and maybe, he'll be merciful to me. So I used to pray for my whole family, and I'd add something new. And I remember when I was like, thank you for Man United, Ameen, and I just held my head and I was like, Ameen.
Well, not only God heard his prayers, but Manchester United heard them too. They sent for him to Old Trafford, and he went there, and they sent him a jersey that the whole team signed, and he was a big celebrity. So unfortunately, I think we've run out of time. We have 12 minutes left, and I think it's question time. But there's a lot he hasn't told you that's in the book about how he left Afghanistan, how he got back, what happened, how he felt. And I really recommend that you read his book. It's incredible. So we'll take questions. I don't know who's got the mic. But I just want to say one thing. You have to ask a question. You cannot give a speech. There are only 12 minutes.
Is there a mic? My Khala's a little tougher than me. I would have given you more.
Hello. So Shahbaz, I have read the book. I was almost scared to read it, but I read it. And you made things very easy. I mean, the read was very easy. Was that deliberate?
Yeah, I have no training in writing. So what you read is someone with no training. I put everything that I had into this book. I also had two amazing people. My mother and my mamu, who's not with me anymore, but I actually got to do this experience with, these two people, and they, like something that I've always felt in life is you need someone to give you direction. Sometimes you can be a little full of yourself or get ahead of yourself. It happens. Because you're talking about, unfortunately for me, my story is about me, so I have to talk about myself, and I can't put a cap on it. So I literally need my mother to say, stop. And, and so it took us about 4.5 years to write this book. And the only thing that I wanted while writing it was for you to read it for you to read it and feel my pain, but not to be upset by it, because it's got a happy ending. And my only attempt was to take the reader through my isolation. So I don't know if I managed to do this, but it was a deliberate. I did want for you to read something very tragic and difficult, but understand that I am a very grateful, very hopeful person, and I'm very blessed. And that's the only thing that I tried to get through.
Mia.
So, in your 4-year journey, they say when you're in the lowest of your points of life, one tends to retrospect and audit where they might have done some wrongs. Were there any moments where you'd like to share where you kind of look back at life and said, I was an a-hole then. I'm sorry for that.
I did.
I can answer that for you. When he locked you out of the house, Mia.
You question your entire existence. So it's not as easy as an incident. When I was in my lowest point, I had come to a point where I thought that, yeah, what have I done to deserve this, right? And I felt that if this is happening to me, I must have done something to deserve it. Let me tell you something. If someone is torturing you, or abusing you, or crossing your boundaries, it's not because of something that you've done in your life. It's because of the evil that this person wants to do to you. So, although it was very difficult, let me tell you, because I blame myself. I used to think maybe it wasn't because I wasn't with my father. Maybe it's because I wasn't a good son to my mother after my father died. Maybe I'm not a good brother. Maybe, I'm not a good this. 1,000 things. Maybe I'm not a good friend. Maybe I'm not a good human being. Otherwise, why would something like this happen to you? But I had to remind myself that if someone is abusing you, if violently, whatever it is, it's not your fault. You haven't done anything. This is the evil inside this person. This actually gave me the strength to go through with this. This is how I started taking them on. You can say that this is happening to me because I'm an evil person, or you can say that this is happening to me because you've done it. So, the words that follow after that. So I was a bit, I don't want to say arrogant, but I was adamant that this is not because of anything that I've done. And if there's anything that has happened, it's my father's sacrifice. So I haven't done anything.
Hello, Shahbaz. It's extremely inspirational hearing you talk. My question is that your father died standing up against what he called the Kala Kanun, and you mentioned that you were kidnapped because of being your father's son. Unfortunately, nothing much has changed on the front of blasphemy laws. How hopeful are you that at least in your lifetime, something positive can be achieved?
Just this is something that I always say. My father didn't die. He was murdered by his guard in cold blood over just nothing that was real. And yes, as a matter of fact, I think certain things have even regressed in this country. Just somebody was saying, they've come back and, they're coming back and they're doing things. All laws, no matter what laws they are, right? You shouldn't be offended when you discuss your constitution and the laws that govern you. That's the first thing. Don't be offended. They're man-made laws, and they're there for, all laws are there to benefit you. So if there's a law that doesn't benefit you and uplift you in society, that's basically the job of government. The job of government is to make sure that the citizens that it's governing have good lives and the ability to, so if you're born, poor, you have the opportunity because of your government to go, to achieve things in life. So if there are laws that are draconian and persecute you, they shouldn't be part of the laws that govern you. Also, if you are a majority in a country, don't look down on your minorities, okay? If you read the Quran, a Muslim is supposed to protect all minorities, not just Christians and Jews, any minority, anyone. It is a Muslim's responsibility to be fair. So if you're a Muslim, be fair. The blasphemy laws are actually from the Muslim side. They're not Christian blasphemy laws. So if you're a Muslim, be fair, and just remember your job is to uplift people and give a better life.
We have another question here, and then one there and one in the back. I think we might be out of time.
Hi. So you mentioned that you faced some kind of skepticism once you realized you were going back home. What were your feelings when you realized you're actually coming back home, and what were the struggles you faced with coming back to normalcy?
It was really difficult because I escaped. I got to Pakistan. I called my mother and I told her, just don't do anything. Just send a guy on a motorcycle to this restaurant and pick me up. And then maybe 40 minutes later, the whole place was hit by, these agents and gunmen. And they, by the way, didn't recognize me. So they kicked me in the stomach and I was the first one down. And so I had no sense of joy. I was in a lot of pain. And every time the guy was going, I was like, I think you're here for me. I think you're here for me. And they would ignore me. 2 guys ignored me. And then I was like, I think they're not here for me. I've just gotten stuck in a terrorist bust up. I'm going to another jail. Then I'm going to be like, I'm Shahbaz Taseer. And they'll be like, everyone's Shahbaz Taseer. Now, Guantanamo Bay. So I was very scared. And one guy was going, and I just grabbed his arm, and I spoke in English. So I was like, you're here for me, and my name is Shahbaz Taseer. So anyways, he let my hand go, and he went. And then, he came back, and he's like, you're Shahbaz Taseer? I was like, anyways. So, I had been lied to and deceived for these years that I didn't trust anyone. I think when I sat in that car, there was a release that I cannot explain, that I had not experienced in my life. And I was on the phone with my mother. And yeah, it was.
But I think you need to tell them what the general said to you when he spoke to you, the question he asked you,
Yeah,
to
so-
identify you.
So the reason that the general asked the question is very funny, because I didn't look like Shahbaz Taseer. I look like, as someone on Twitter said, Baitullah Masood's brother. That's not true, because his brother was very ugly, and I felt that I had done justice to the beard. So the first thing they asked me was, they were like, he's a wonderful man. His name is General Aftab. He helped my mother throughout my kidnapping. And he said, Beta, I need you to answer this question. And I was like, what? And there was a lot of chaos. And he's like, what wood are you made out of? So I said, I'm not made from wood, I'm made from solid steel. He said, don't joke around with me, answer the question. So I said, I'm not made from a wood that burns easily, which is something that my father sent to my mother on a note that he smuggled to my mother when he was in solitary confinement under Zia-ul-Haq, and they couldn't find him, and they'd almost given up, and my mother got this note. So.
Also, the first video that came of Shahbaz, he was in a suicide vest, and he had all these masked gunmen with these huge guns standing behind him. And he was made to make a statement, and he made the statement, which was scripted by the Uzbeks. And at the end of the statement, he said, I'm made from a wood that does not burn easily.
Yeah, I just wanted to give my mother some. I didn't know it would be 4.5 years, but I just wanted all of them to know that I'd be okay.
Cheena.
Shahbaz, welcome home, welcome to Pakistan, and amazing. I can't tell you, it's like, you know, when I got your book 3 months ago, when it came out, it was my nephew was getting it from New York, and he was getting scared of bringing it from New York. And second, what you wrote in the book about your dad, that, you know, aap us lakdi se nahi bane ho, jo aaram se jal jati hai. That is so true. Third, you being a Superman. And you know, that are the small things in the book. And it's such a asan kitab that everyone can read it. I need to ask you the relationship with Allah. Like you got a Quran. They gave you a Quran. It says in the kitab, in your book, that it had English meanings. And then you started reading it. Were it, आप पहले भी ऐसे ही थे या अल्लाह से relationship बाद में दोस्ती ज़्यादा हुई है?
हम सब मुसलमान हैं, चाहे practicing हैं या मैं थोड़ा सा दूर था, मगर जो what I found in the Quran, it was almost sometimes I used to feel like what I felt, the ayats would speak to me. They would guide me. Now, it's a bit, you know, this is why I know people have a very difficult time because they've known me before, they know me now, they're like, how is this part of your identity? But it's not part of my identity, it's actually what saved my soul and my heart. And, you know, I always say this, sometimes, you know, people say, read the Ayatul Kursi, 1,000 angels will come and protect you, and then somebody dies and they're like, oh, Allah, you know, said, yeah. When you read the Ayatul Kursi, I'll tell you something beautiful. The angels that come down to protect you, they protect your heart, your soul, and your mind. They keep you on the kalma. And if you die on the kalma, you're a martyr, you're a man of God.
But it's all your love of your family and your ekta. You know, you are all united, and especially people were close to the end. When I read the book, ऐसा लगता है कि, you know, ये कोई movie है, but we know them. It's really very touchy, and Allah bless you. Allah really bless you.
Thank you.
Can I say a word, please? Hello? Shahbaz, my name is Ruby Haider.
Thank you.
Walaikum assalam. I mean, I really don't know what to say to you. It has been an amazingly cathartic experience just to listen to you.
Oh, thank you.
You know, and I don't know. I mean, I feel that you talk about this experience with, you know, such clarity. And there is no bitterness when you talk about it. I think it has added so much to the person that you are today.
Thank you.
You talk about the little human moments. You talk about that football relationship. You pick up on all this thing, even when you're standing in the balti. You know, I am just totally amazed at the man you are. And I hope the rest of your life is full of the joy and peace that you deserve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's very kind. Thank
Well,
you.
Well,
Thank
he's
you.
going to be at the IBA tomorrow, so you can go and hear him there if anyone hasn't heard him today. But thank you all very much. Thank you, Shahbaz Taseer, for this wonderful, wonderful session.